Lots of injuries that we're keeping an eye on, hopefully more in the positive, though, when it comes to Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Breece Hall. All are expected to play at this point. However, Tua Tagovailoa not going to play as the Dolphins quarterback has been ruled out with a concussion. Dave's start or sit suggestion is to sit Chase Edmonds, but I'm sure you would say sit both Dolphins running backs.
Sure. I'd like to have Mostert on the bench, though.
Yes, not a bad stash candidate. Still, Chase Edmonds could be worth stashing as well. The DFS play is Teddy Bridgewater stepping in for Tua Tagovailoa, and the prop to play is Zach Wilson over 8.5 rushing yards. So, Dave, the question I want to ask you is, Breece Hall's been building towards some nice performances last week, career high in carries. Is he now an automatic must-start against a very tough Dolphins run defense?
It's a tough Dolphins run defense, especially between the tackles. The Jets are going to have to get him going on the edges and in the passing game, and I think they do it. I think you look at what they have done previously with Breece Hall and Michael Carter, using them on the edges. I think they get it going. Breece Hall is the more talented running back. I think he's a must-start, especially considering just the lay of the land with running backs. This is another one, this young rusher. He's been very good. I'd start him ahead of Najee Harris. I'd start him ahead of Ezekiel Elliott. Start him ahead of James Conner, too.
Makes a lot of sense. Hopefully keeps going. And again, you mentioned it, 6 targets last week in the passing game, only 2 catches, but nice to see Zach Wilson looking for him. Adam, make sense of the Jets receiving core, because we thought that Garrett Wilson was starting to take over. Then Corey Davis just doesn't go away. Zach Wilson makes his first start, and it was the Corey Davis show. Once again, you go back to last year, that was the guy that Zach Wilson was leaning on. Elijah Moore is still yet to do anything, but a lot of fantasy managers are still hopeful for him. So rank those 3 guys for this week. Who do you trust the most?
I'm going to say Garrett Wilson, followed by Corey Davis, followed by Elijah Moore. I don't really want to start any of them. We just don't have enough. I know we can go back to the first 5 games of last year where Corey Davis was actually pretty good, but I think he only had more than 45 receiving yards in two of those games. So it's not like he's been great with Zach Wilson, and there's just too much of a small sample size here. I'm pretty much throwing away the first 3 games of the year. It was a different quarterback, and they were throwing more than 50 times a game. So I really want to take a wait-and-see approach. And by the way, practice report just released. Xavier Howard was out there practicing today, so that makes this an even tougher matchup if Xavier Howard can play for the Miami Dolphins. So I would take Wilson, then Davis, then Moore, but none of them are top 24 receivers for me.
All right, so we'll see what happens in the second game for Zach Wilson. So at best, though, Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, number 3 receivers. Elijah Moore, you just can't trust until we start to see a little bit more. Titans at Commanders, that's the next game we're looking at here, and should be some fun fantasy production in this matchup, as these defenses have not exactly played up to par. The injuries we're keeping an eye on there, mostly for the Washington receiving corps. Jahan Dotson not expected to go. Curtis Samuel, we hope to get a practice report that he's out there dealing with an illness that is causing him to miss practice Wednesday and Thursday. Adam's start-sit suggestion is to start Terry McLaurin. The DFS play is Robert Woods. And the prop to play is Carson Wentz over 1.5 passing touchdowns. That's at plus 159. So Adam, make sense of this Washington receiving core, and we'll factor in Logan Thomas as well. Again, not expecting Dotson, but let's say Samuel does play. So McLaurin, Samuel, Logan Thomas. Who do you like? Who do you want to avoid?
I want to avoid Logan Thomas if I can. I mean, this is a decent streaming option here. The Titans are giving up the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends. But Samuel is going to be that short area guy, which is still a little gimmicky, right? If you're not making any plays downfield, there are going to be some bad games, and he could feel like a little bit of a bust because people really bought in. But I think McLaurin's going to be the best wide receiver in this game. I think he's set up nicely in this game. I don't think that I like Terry McLaurin or the passing game against teams like the Eagles or the Cowboys, right? Those are the last 2 opponents. It's going to be a much, much different game for the Washington Commanders this week. And they're not really going to be able to run the ball, I don't think, because they don't have a good running game, and this is actually a pretty good run defense for Tennessee. Terrible pass defense. Expect a lot of pass attempts, a lot of air yards. It's going to help Terry McLaurin. He could have a really big week. He's in my DFS lineup.
Let's go down to the next game that we're looking at here is the Bears at the Vikings. And the injury that we're keeping an eye on is David Montgomery dealing with that ankle problem. So we'll see if he's able to play. If he does, we'll talk about this, what it means for Khalil Herbert, who was a must-start fantasy running back going into last week's game. Didn't have a huge matchup, didn't have a huge performance, against the Giants, but did get a lot of work. The starter sit suggestion is to start Adam Thielen. He's had 7 or more targets in 3 straight games. Very productive the last 2 weeks. Should be productive once again. The DFS play is Kirk Cousins, and the prop to play, stop me if you heard this before. I like to take the half over when there was a half something when it's a positive number. Justin Fields under a half passing touchdown. He just doesn't throw very many passing touchdowns. Has not done that since week 1. That's at plus 126. So Dave, makes sense of the Chicago backfield. If Montgomery plays, who do we like? And if Montgomery's out, how much do we like Khalil Herbert?
I like Herbert a lot as a number 2 fantasy running back. This Vikings run defense, I know they looked pretty good last week. Well, I guess they look pretty good against the running backs. Taysom Hill had some numbers. But I don't necessarily think that they're going to be able to completely shut down Chicago. If it's Herbert, he's a number 2 guy. If Montgomery plays, I think they're both high-end number 3 running backs. I really think that you can't count on either one to get you 15-plus carries. The Bears will probably rotate them, and then whoever has a hot hand in the second half is the one that they'll give the ball to. Fantasy managers are going to be left guessing.
It was a 2-to-1 series split was how they're doing it before Montgomery got hurt. So we'll see if it's Montgomery getting the 2 or Herbert getting the 2. But could be frustrating if Montgomery does play for those of you that were counting on Khalil Herbert. Next game we're looking at here is the Lions at the Patriots. This one's for Dave. The injury of note is Mac Jones. Expected to play at this point. We're hoping to get Jacoby Myers out there. For the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, waiting to find out his status. DeAndre Swift probably not going to go, but we did get some good news that Josh Reynolds back at a limited practice. Same thing with DJ Chark on Thursday. So the start-sit suggestion is to start Josh Reynolds. The DFS play is Nelson Aguilar, and the prop to play is Damian Harris, who scored 2+ touchdowns at plus 500. That would be a fun bet to cash if, in fact, he finds the end zone twice. So, Dave, when we look at this Lions offense, last week was amazing. Goff went off. Jamal Williams went off. Josh Reynolds went off. T.J. Hockenson was amazing. Can they do it against a tougher opponent in the Patriots?
And that's the whole thing. It's a tougher opponent. It's Bill Belichick. He's had Jared Goff's number before, and I actually think he's going to play a different type of defensive scheme against him than what he's done in the past. In the past, he's blitzed the snot out of Jared Goff, and Goff has wilted. I don't think he can do that. I don't think the Patriots' pass rush is as good, but I still think their zone coverage defense, especially if there's no Amon-Ra St. Brown, will be able to contain Jared Goff. I know that sounds silly, but he's been good for fantasy. I like him as a sleeper, as a streamer, low-end starter at best. Jamal Williams is a must-start. I think Josh Reynolds is a must-start too, especially in PPR leagues. I think he's got 15-point potential. And who in the world is getting away from T.J. Hockenson after what he did last week? You know what that crazy upside is. Should be good for at least double digits in PPR.
Next game we have here is the Seahawks at the Saints, and should be an interesting game there with a lot of things at play when it comes to both of these offenses. Seattle coming off an amazing game last week against Detroit, but it was Detroit, and the Saints trying to get some guys healthy. James Winston probably not going to play. We'll wait to find out the status of Michael Thomas, but Alvin Kamara is going to play through the rib injury. The starter sit suggestion, according to Adam Azer, to sit Rashad Penny. The DFS play is to go with Alvin Kamara, and the prop to play is Geno Smith under 241.5 passing yards. Adam, the best receiver in this game is who?
I'm going to say it is Chris Olave, assuming Michael Thomas doesn't play, and it does not look like Michael Thomas is going to play. Olave's just been really good. He can make plays downfield. He can make plays after the catch. And yeah, look, it's a bit of a guessing game between Metcalf and Lockett. Who's going to get more targets? Who's going to get more production? Metcalf's had 2 good weeks in a row, but only 1 game with a lot of yards this year. His first 2 games were really bad. I think Olave has a higher floor than both of them, and I think he has just as high of a ceiling. So he is the best wide receiver in this game. I
would go with Chris Olave as well. Even if Michael Thomas does play at this point, I think Olave is locked in. 13 targets in each of the 2 games prior to last week. Scored a touchdown last week. And the Seattle defense clearly not very good.